You are about to journey against the current of contemporary thought and beyond the troubled waters of daily news to the very source of our extraordinary culture. You are going upstream with Cashel and Edge.
Well, here we are one more time at Real Media Studios in Overland Park, Kansas.
Great place to be.
You can do your podcast here. If it's not going to be as good as our podcast, but
Not even remotely. Are you kidding?
But if you wanted to try and practice, it's a good place to come on in. Just give these guys a call here and at Real Media, REAL Media, and you could look that up on your Google, and it'll tell you how to get here. But it's been fun. We had a great year, and they've been very good to us. And I cannot tell you how much I appreciate it.
It's just a real great place to come and hang your hat and spend a couple hours. It's a good working environment. They're very friendly.
Yes, indeed.
And they agree with a lot of our philosophies.
Yes, which is not necessarily all of them, as a caveat there, but enough of them so that they tolerate our presence here.
That's right.
Now, we were going to talk about today a little bit about the future because you have, oddly, had a Pollyannish moment here.
I have.
Yeah, we were talking about this, that you were thinking that the future of America's young people is not quite as grim as we might have anticipated. You see slivers of hope.
Oh, I do. I mean, it's messy.
Yeah.
Like everything else, there's a lot of waste, fraud, and abuse, and a lot of things going the wrong direction. But there's one thing that's really stricken me lately, which is and really, you're familiar with Charlie Kirk.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
And what is his thing called?
Turning Point.
Turning Point, yeah. And he's one of these guys, for the people who aren't familiar with Charlie Kirk, which he's an aptly named guy.
Yeah.
Kirk.
I mean, church.
Right. I don't know what Charlie means.
Charlie means Viet Cong. Yeah, right.
Viet Cong and church. But what I noticed was they've kind of got this song and dance they take around a different campus.
Right.
Campi,
yeah,
as Rush used to say. And they've organized these really legitimate demonstrations, I guess you would call them, for want of a better word.
Uh-huh.
They're really conversations,
right,
where they invite the young people who are on the campus to articulate their complaints and observations, and they while they present a more conservative or Christian or the American perspective.
Sure.
But what's happening, I've noticed, is that the conversations are deep and they're genuine. And it's not just Charlie Kirk, but there are many other people. Matt Walsh, I guess, a lot of these
young people like Michael Knowles, those
Michael
Daily Wire
Knowles,
people, Ben Shapiro.
And they confront people on it's no longer the same kind of thing that went on in colleges in the 60s, 70s, 80s, which is just get in there, raise hell, throw some crap at people, put some crazy signs up, do something dramatic, cause some disruption, say some bad words, lash out, act out, do all this stuff, cause trouble, meet some chicks, get high. I mean, that's what the whole college scene was.
I was there.
Yeah, I mean, it had a lot of time on your hands and
that's right.
nervous energy.
That was a big part of it.
You wanted to meet chicks.
Right,
I mean, come
get
on,
high,
get high. So, but this is going on. All those people that are part of that economy, that ecology of the colleges, they may not notice the difference. But these people that are gathering for these things now, that are headed by Charlie Kirk and things like this, these people are very, very deep into the actual arguments.
Yes, and they are supplemented by a growing school of ex-liberals.
Yes.
Of smart ex-liberals. The IDW crowd. You know what the IDW is?
Mm-mm.
The intellectual dark web.
Oh.
And it includes people like Brett Weinstein, and like guys like Matt Taibbi, Mike Schellenberg, Barry Weiss, people who wouldn't believe 5 years ago that they'd be on the side that they're on now. And they're all pretty young, and they're all capable. Or a British guy, Douglas Murray, I wouldn't want to go near Douglas Murray in a debate. He's the Christopher Hitchens of our era, who are willing to engage.
Yeah.
You know, I sometimes pity the poor college students who try to think they're going to win this argument, but they try, and sometimes you get some interesting conversations.
It is kind of fun to watch these guys get smacked down.
Yeah.
And some of those video highlights go viral, and you'll have your Candace Owens or somebody just rip them a new one because they're so stupid. And they have no idea what they're talking about, and they're playing the old crap that they played for 40 years, you know, the 60s, 70s, 80s. They're all out there, and they're being smarmy and smart ass, and they're saying, you know, this and that, and they get and it's no longer plays. It's like they can't answer any questions, and they get their ass handed to them, and people are actually accidentally learning stuff now. These people are actually having to sit there and actually think about this stuff.
Now, and the question is, can we reach enough people to save civilization, right?
That's always the question. It's always the horse race.
You know, I was listening to a podcast with Dave Rubin and Brett Weinstein, and both of them are Jewish. Rubin's gay.
Yeah.
Both of them are recovering liberals. And both of them belong to the IDW, the intellectual, or have belonged to it, or it's an informal thing. It's not a real thing. But they were talking, and Weinstein was kind of interesting because he's an evolutionary biologist who got basically thrown out of Evergreen State where he was teaching for being a white man. And it was a sobering moment for him because he was considered himself a hardcore lefty. And what he said is that no person of intellectual integrity is left on the left. He said every person he knows that has some integrity is moved to the right or moved away from the left, certainly. And for a lot of these people, it's an incremental journey. Other guys like Charlie Kirk were well-schooled from the beginning, or Michael Knowles and Ben Shapiro. And the net result, though, is that you're having all the smart people are ending up on one side of the debate. The Bill Maher's, you know, who are reaching young people.
This is really, really, we're in mid-flux.
Yes.
Mid-flux.
And, you know, the stupid people are still greatly in the majority in colleges. But there's a glimmer of hope. It really is.
Well, it's the depth of the conversation is really, I mean, they're not. It's not for show anymore.
Right.
It was all for show in the 60s and 70s, and you know, what are you lashing out about? What do you got?
Right.
It was that kind of deal.
The line from "What Are You Rebelling Against?" from the Wild One, the Marlon Brando, right? Which was the kind of and then in the 60s, there was the
Vietnam thing.
They stumbled on two issues. One was civil rights, and the other was Vietnam. Although I was in graduate school at the time, the Vietnam, the draft ended, right? And then the whole movement went away overnight. All these people marching, they didn't care about Vietnamese being slaughtered. They just cared about their number being called, right? And the hypocrisy and the idiocy from inside, you saw it on display all the time. I remember, for instance, I was in college in Albany, New York. In 1967, they had the March on the Pentagon, right? And I was living in the equivalent of a hippie pad. We were like hippie central. You know, it was drug head central. And I was more of an observer than a participant, but it was fascinating living laboratory of idiocracy, basically. And so one of the guys who was there staying with us, he wasn't one of a formal roommate, but he was there enough to be a near roommate. he said, "Hey, the March on the Pentagon's coming up. What do you say we all go down there and join in?" And I said to him, "You don't care about the Vietnam, what are you going to go for?" He goes, "They're going to be all the women, all the drugs. I said, "It's a 5-hour drive. We can find all that right here in Albany. You don't have to go that far, And or another time.
But that was the deal.
That was the deal. Another time, these guys were all sitting around smoking dope, and in 1966, 7, that was pretty revolutionary. Most of them junior high schoolers weren't getting high at that time. That would come a few years later, as you probably could testify. But so they're sitting around talking, and what they did is they talked exclusively about drugs and music. And 80-90% of the conversation was about that. Where to get drugs, what drugs, what music to listen to, psychedelic experiences. And then this guy comes in, and a lot of these people would just move from like outpost to outpost. We were an outpost on the Pony Express of hippiedom, Guy comes in, and he's dressed like one of the Three Musketeers. That was part of the package then. And he walks in and he goes, "Man," he goes, "I want to talk to you about the war." And then one guy to him says, "Don't bum us out with the war. We're getting high here." They didn't care. But they attributed to themselves a great deal of intellectual, heft. It wasn't there.
Right.
It was all a charade. And so we tend to think that young people today are uniquely stupid. They're stupider, but it's a matter of degrees, because in our generation, they were not particularly bright either. They flattered themselves into thinking they mattered and that they cared about stuff, but it was they were empty-headed. And to the degree, I noticed this, to the degree that you hated your family is the degree that you were radical at that time. That was
makes sense.
So much a part of it all.
Yeah, and I've often referred to the Democrat Party as the Mad at Daddy Party.
Yeah, that's a good observation. I remember sitting in a movie theater in the late 60s or early 70s, and it was some documentary, anti-war kind of thing. And I was sitting next to the big, hefty girl, and they would always be in the forefront of these movements. And every time a male authority figure appeared on the screen, she'd go, "Ha, ha, ha," this really kind of unnerving, kind of sick laughter. And you realize that
spitting jujubes out.
right. That there were some problems going on at home,
Mm-hmm.
And that was, and the manifestation was that she joins the left and hates male authority figures. So,
but the stuff that's going on the campus now is based, and a lot of it has Christian based.
Based, by the way, is a slang for well-grounded and good thought, right?
Right, and it goes with my theory of zero sum, zero base.
Yeah, right.
Because if you are based, you're going to zero base,
mm-hmm.
and you're infinite sum.
Yeah.
And if your base ain't right,
uh-huh.
and there's something wrong with your base,
yeah,
it's not really in line.
Right.
You're a zero sum thinker.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's just the way it is. And you'll never find that base because you can't see it for the forest, for all the trees.
Yeah.
You wouldn't know it if it bit you on the ass.
And, and to the degree that one hopeful sign, too, is that even though the great majority of college students probably think left, vote left right now, the degree they have a knowledge base is so superficial
Mm-hmm.
and so weak. And that's why people like the Matt Walshes and Michael Knowles can come in and obliterate them because they have nothing to argue about. I saw this one demonstration just recently. This young woman is at the University of Florida, and she's interviewing students about DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, all the rage, although it's peaked. Hamas has made people rethink their DEI affiliations.
We've almost ridiculed it out of the page one, yeah.
So she comes up to these students and says, "What do you think about diversity on campus?" "Oh, all for it. It should have the student body should reflect the population." And go one group after another, a couple girls, guy, some of them more enthusiastic than others, some of them a little wary, but all of them on board. She goes through all that. We see them all saying yes, 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 yes. And then she says, how about with the football team? You think we should have diversity, equity, inclusion with the football team? Then they have, you mean, no, most people say, well, yeah, I mean, and then she said, just let me make it easy for you. Here's what the team would look like if it reflected the canvas. And we see these little nerdy Chinese guys, and, this is the University of Florida. This is a major industry there,
Right.
And then they all, to a person, say, no, that should be merit-based, right?
Right.
And then she comes back to them. Actually, she probably all did one at a time, but we see them in sequence. Does your opinion now about sports make you think differently about other fields of endeavor? Like school and grades and whatnot.
No,
that was this weird thing. They all said yes. They were all converted in 5 minutes of argument. And the argument wasn't even a hard argument. It was just a soft argument, playing it Socratically, just letting these people, talk themselves out of their own positions. So there's hopeful moments, hopeful moments. But if the campuses are to be redeemed, the institutions, I think, that will redeem it are the fraternities.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't even think about that.
I got involved a couple of years ago with the fraternity at the University of Nebraska. I wrote an article about it, and they were very helpful and very grateful. They had, this must have been, I don't know, it was probably in 2020 when this occurred. They had a women's march. The University of Nebraska is in Lincoln, which is the state capital. So they marched from campus to the state capital. And the fraternities were en route, at least a couple of them. And they greeted the march with huge Trump signs, Trump 2020 signs, right? And they were hooting and hollering at the marchers, right? Because the march was for some leftist female cause. And as a result, the university shut the fraternities down, right?
Really?
And then they protested, and they brought in their national, the national chapters, and the net result was something of a standoff. I think they were
instituted.
Right. Oh, I got to blow my nose here, so bear with me. I don't want to have a runny nose on my podcast here, but especially since I'm over my cold. I thought it was anyhow.
Well, I'm still hoarse and everything.
Yeah. And then so my wife says, of course, why don't you have a COVID exam? I'm not going to get a COVID exam. I said, I have all the symptoms of a cold. I don't mind having a cold. Colds are part of nature, And, so then she caught what I had, which was my fault. And then she had a COVID test, and she didn't have COVID, right? So I said, good, I don't have COVID either. Then I saved myself the hassle of taking a test.
That's why you have a wife.
That's right. That's actually this
guinea
is why.
pig thing.
No. This is why, and this is a crazy statistic, but it's true. It's a legit statistic.
What do you got?
The married men live like 6 or 7 years longer than single men.
Oh yeah, I've heard that.
And it's not a.
And then of course they automatically say, well, not really, but it seems like it.
That may be so, but we have fewer HIV deaths among us, We can't both drink water at the same time. It's like,
well, I didn't crunch mine.
I did crunch mine.
You're crunching yours.
But drinking water at the same time is like having, what was the guy's name? Edgar Bergen and Charlie McCarthy drinking water at the same time.
That's right. It's hard to do. and I'm getting awfully tired of voicing all of your comments anyhow. It's about time for you to pick up the
slack. No, that's beyond me. Any other signs of life on campus? Hopeful signs among young people?
Well, I like your point about the fraternities. I think that's all part of that same structure, but I'm enthusiastic about the depth that they're going to with these arguments, because they're not just arguing to argue, and they're not fighting to fight. They're coming out there to bring real answers to formerly what I think is for 50 years been a vacuum.
Right.
a complete vacuum. Anything that had anything to do with traditional or religious, theological basis to it, economic, factual basis, anything reasonable has been out the window. And it's just like, just yell, just argue, just pound on shit.
And you know what? One medium that makes a difference, that has made a difference and will continue to make a difference?
The internet.
The podcast.
That's what I mean.
Yeah. I mean, the podcast, you know, Joe Rogan does 3 hours a day.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of young people listen to podcasts.
Yeah. And I think that's back to it's a deep dive conversation.
Yeah.
Compared to all the other headline soundbite crap that kids watch, that kids have to avail themselves of. But what all these people are doing is their platform enables them to go deeper.
Right. That's right.
And to confront things, and you can, and then you get that action. You get they trot the kids up and they let them say their stupid stuff, and they shoot them down
gently.
Yeah. But this whole process, for the first time in 50 years, they're now engaged in a learning process.
Right.
And what you see before you is actual college happening.
Right. Yeah.
College broke out here.
Accidentally, maybe. Or it had to come in from outside.
This is somebody opened the door and Socrates came in.
Yeah. But you actually make an excellent point, though, about college isn't happening in colleges.
Yeah.
I mean, so you're not allowed debate at colleges. I mean, at universities, because you might hurt someone's feeling, and you might find, I mean, I know, boy, there's just so many examples of, it usually happens to young men who are the ones who are, you know, they can be punished. They could, you know, lose their grade, lose their course, be thrown out of school for questioning things that absolutely demand to be questioned. And
now you've got the guys, Matt Walsh or somebody sitting at a table
that
says, change my mind.
Right.
And they're inviting the students, the young students, to come up and express themselves for once. And so what's happening is this is a self-cleansing process now.
Right.
The humiliation, the embarrassment that is well earned by the little professors coming up and expressing their their well thought out opinions on these world matters is now, it's fixing it. It's fixing it by the fact that they're ridiculous. Yeah. And we're getting to see that now. Right. And now instead of just the media following them around going, look at these brave soldiers out there fighting the system, and look at these brave young people. Now the media has to sit there on their hands and go, well, you see it. It's a crap show. The guy's an idiot.
Right. That's right. And now you go on YouTube, and he's like, on my YouTube feed. I don't know if you use YouTube much, but they indulge all your biases, basically. Right. So every day I'll get, and so you have a homepage, and there might be 20 different little 5-10 minute features. And mine will be, every day they'll be like, Candace Owens makes fool of Lefty.
Right,
right. And it's usually headlined that way to attract viewers like me. So, but you're up there. If you're the lefty who's being made a fool of, and a million people are seeing this, it's chastising. You don't want that to happen to you in the future.
They're feeling what we're always getting group shamed about, and all this stuff, only it's legitimate. It's real. It's like, you don't want to be a stupid fool.
Right.
Really?
Yeah.
No, really, you don't.
There's no future in it.
There's no future in it. It's not cool anymore.
No.
NBC, CBS, CNBC, MSNBC, they don't all get and cheerlead for you anymore just because you made some white guy look bad.
Yeah. You know, what's happened, too, is that, in the 60s, college students started using drugs. The 60s really started about what we think of as the 60s, about 65. several years were still in the 50s.
Beatnik thing.
Certainly as long as JFK was alive. It was all upbeat, forward-looking, happy. Then it changed in the end, the second half of the decade. But they were of the mindset then that they were actually doing something doing something meaningfully. They weren't, but they were. That's the way they thought.
You mean what the intellectual capacity they were bringing to the game was a real contribution.
But at that time, I will say this in their favor, was that there were movements like the free speech movement at Berkeley, right?
Mm.
That they were in favor of argument and they were in favor of disputation. Now, they didn't know what they were. I mean, they were no brighter than they are today, but they at least had that going for them. There was a guy, the leader of the free speech movement at Berkeley was a guy named Mario Savio. And I had a good friend who grew up near Berkeley in a neighboring town, I think Albany, California, whose claim to fame was that his father ran over Mario Savio's dog, right?
Hmm.
So, but people knew who Mario Savio was. And they knew the names of these college student leaders, who were getting famous, making, campus tours, being advocates of dissent and speech. Again, it was empty, but they were at least advocating for it. We need that to come back. I think that the guys you're talking about, the Charlie Kirks, are going to reintroduce that kind of phenomenon with content, though, now. Not just the empty, I'm against the war, I'm for civil rights, thoughts that weren't thought out very well, but you still had platforms then. So now perhaps we can have both.
Debate society type approach, which is like vocabulary that we talked about a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
Something that really needs to be focused upon again.
So,
because really when you think about it, debate and vocabulary are two things that have fallen deeply by the wayside that need to become part of this classical education again.
Which was like part of the the whole British tradition of that stand-up debate. In fact, I saw Ben Shapiro doing it, and we might have talked about this, but he was the way it was structured is that he'd go and this is at Oxford, and then a student would come up and face off against him for about 5 minutes, and they would exchange ideas, right? So they were talking about Hamas. And this one, Arab woman, Islamic woman, was complaining that there was indiscriminate bombing of Gaza by the Jews, by the IDF. And Shapiro said no. And he said, listen, what's proportionate war? He said proportionate war means it's a nonsensical issue.
Mm-hmm.
Does that mean that we go in and kill 1,400 of your people and rape them and behead them? No, it doesn't work that way. The way war works is that you start something, you get punished to the degree that they could punish you effectively. The IDF is probably the most restrained entity in the world. And then the woman said, she goes, well, they didn't, in Europe, they didn't do that. They didn't have mass bombing. And then the audience goes, what? Like this collective sigh, And then Shapiro says, there was no civilian bombing during World War II? And the woman said, no, not the way they're doing it in Gaza. He goes, did you ever hear of Dresden? When you come to one of these debating platforms, you really embarrass yourself if you don't bring any information to the table. In the classrooms, they can get away with it because no one knows anything.
Nobody knows anything.
And the professors are afraid.
And they fall right into that little zero-sum, comfortable mentality that they have, where they don't need to think about all those unlimited potential issues.
The real challenge, though, is to get young women on board. The men will come first, just like in the black community. The men are waking up. Young women are a particularly vulnerable breed. And
where I see that kind of where the polyana is coming around, I think the scam that women have fallen for so long, that their rights were actually being stomped upon, and that they were not allowed to have all these different options for life.
Right.
I'm sorry, you're not allowed to do that. You must be a charwoman. It's like, but now they've been laboring away under this false premise that they must all have some menial job that a man would chase in order to be whole,
right,
and not fall into these traditional female roles of being a wife and a mother and all these things. A lot of them are going, you know what? I just realized women have always been allowed to do this shit if they wanted to.
Right.
Most of them just didn't want to, or were not wired as a zero-based thinker. They are not. They're zero-sum thinkers, so their options are limited to a mediocre, crappy little job, because you're not really one of those people wired to be out there in the aggressive, competitive work world.
Right.
There have always been women who are.
Yeah.
But they're just 3% of the population. 10% of the men are that way.
Right.
90% of the men are the same. They're just like, I'm a zero-sum thinker. I need a job. I need a woman, and they're expecting me to work and bring a check, and then I'm expecting them to feed the family and have. But instead, it's all gone on this fantasy thing of they're all, chasing some crazy career.
We can have it all.
We can have it all, and then all of a sudden, it starts to sink into a lot of them who are going, why am I on a wild goose chase with all these loser men for these crappy jobs?
Right.
When I'd be a great mother and manage the household, raise some great kids, teach them.
Right.
They're starting to pick up on that organically, because the argument's becoming weakened.
Right. And I mean, the arguments are coming weakened. Short of being like Prime Minister of Great Britain, no job that a woman's going to have is as meaningful as being a mother.
Yeah.
Or as consequential.
If you are a zero-based thinker who's driven, and you're an inventor and a visionary and an entrepreneur and all that, you've got a shot at doing something significant that is going to be.
Yeah.
But like you say, in 95% of the cases, all you're doing is robbing yourself from the experience of being a great mother and raising a family and divorce and all these things that accompany this lack of satisfaction that people. I feel like this is going to kind of come around too, and that those women will find their homes outside of that stupid scam of school-based career path, whatever that is. It's just such a waste of.
It's really discouraging. Even when my daughters went to a good Catholic high school, good meaning, you're not likely to get raped in the restrooms. There was no classes on motherhood.
Right.
No instruction in that.
In fact, those have just been mocked and ridiculed out of existence.
Right. No career charts.
Home ec.
Right. None of that. Although I will say, when I was at Purdue in graduate school, there was a big home ec program. And part of that was because free women went to home ec programs, could meet an engineer and get married, But they would, if like my students were in home ec, they'd have classes where they'd need like a demonstration of their home ec skills. They would have to invite someone to have a little dinner, right? And they would make a little dinner, and you get invited to go and have your dinner, and they'd be based on presentation and the quality of the food and everything. As a grifter that I was, it was a good opportunity to sample the virtues of this program. But there was a much more realistic approach to futures than when you're coming up that way through school programs like home ec or, teacher's ed even or whatever, where you're preparing a career that could see you through the early days of your marriage or before marriage.
Right.
And then after, your children are come and gone, as opposed to getting a degree in marketing, say,
yes,
or the empty stuff that.
And this is what
gender
in my
studies.
mom's era.
Yeah,
she was an executive secretary, so she could type her ass off and do and shorthand and all those other skills that are long gone.
Yeah,
and she wasn't wild about it, but then she had a family, raised the kids, went back to work as an executive secretary
right.
at age 50 or whatever, and it was satisfactory for her. She liked it. She enjoyed it. But she was able to completely get off of that grid and become a full-blown housewife and mother until those kids were old enough to go back in school.
Right.
And then she was back in the workforce. But not seeking not with some job that took $200,000 worth of college to make $60,000 a year.
Yeah, right.
She made $55,000 a year by just putting her clothes on and getting in her car and showing up.
Right, exactly. And with some satisfaction. Now, here's a subject we haven't broached on this show all year, but it's the hook that they have into young women now. The hook that the left has into young women, it's a pretty effective one. And that is that to prove that your validity as a young woman, you have to sign on to be willing to kill your unborn children. And they've been very successful. The last 7 ballot issues, the left's won in the last just several months. And it's that's a complicated issue. But before we can see a real hope for, bringing young people into some sort of sane balance with the world, it's an issue that has to be addressed. I'm not sure in this show is in the 10 minutes we have remaining is the place to do it. But to not talk about it is to overlook the real challenge we have and going forward. And so I was thinking, like what I would think, so I was thinking kind of a scam, I grew up in New Jersey, you got to do this. I was always thinking, like once I wanted to start a website in which we would demand that California remove any kind of religious names from any place sites, right? So
that's everything in California.
Everything, right?
Everything.
So you'd go from the town of like Francisco to Barbara, and then Los Angeles would just be Los, that's all you could call it. San Diego would be just Diego, Sacramento would be there'd be nothing left. And then I was wondering, but then I figured I'd get busted and they'd catch on. There was a scam, but I thought it was a good idea. Now my current idea, though, is to alert women to the path that they're being asked to endorse, is to propose a constitutional amendment. And the constitutional amendment would say very simply, a woman's right to kill her unborn baby shall not be infringed, right? Instead of all these wordy kind of word salady things that they put on ballots now and they throw in contraception, this, that, to confuse people into thinking that the right is trying to take all their rights away. Just put it right out there. And that has the same effect of doing what the Charlie Kirks of the world are doing, forcing people to confront the limitations of their own thought processes.
That's right.
So what would happen, do you think, if this were in a state like, let's say, Ohio, or Kentucky, both of which, passed pro-abortion amendments? What would happen if they put something that stark on the ballot? Would it awake young people to the choices they're actually making?
Well, yeah, because it would shift the paradigm.
Right.
It's a false paradigm right now. Whichever paradigm they're pursuing at this point has been defined wrongly. So every argument out there, pro-abortion, anti-abortion, like you say, it's the complexity industry coming in, creating chaos and making everything so abstract and absurd But yes, to boil it down to its essence and to present it in that type of a format is always an opportunity to get closer to a resolution that's real.
Right.
And so, I think that's a great idea. That's the argument we want to have.
That's right, and it would cut through. And this is I was talking about earlier the conversation between Weinstein and Dave Rubin, which is really fascinating, because these are both lefties who've come over, and they said that you can no longer trust any information that comes from the media. And Rubin referred to it as rivers of bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
And he said when you're hearing it, you have to distrust it. It doesn't matter which issue it is. What this would do, the kind of clarification that comes with reseizing control of the language, you're no longer in that river anymore.
That's right.
So, of course, the left would respond. I know I'm using the Second Amendment kind of language, shall not be infringed. You can't argue with that. I mean, it would make it hard. A woman's right, they're okay with that. To kill, no. We'd have to obfuscate there.
Right.
We'd have to say terminate or abort or whatever. We wouldn't even say abort. They want reproductive rights, but no one is challenging anyone's right to reproduce. You can reproduce all you want. No entity of government is telling you you cannot reproduce. You have your reproductive rights. They would want to change that word, to kill. But kill is the simplest, clearest, cleanest word, kill, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then the next one is...
use it in the Ten Commandments even.
Right, that's right.
Or do
Thou shalt
murder.
not, right. And then you have unborn...
Murder would probably be better.
The murder. Kill is a little softer, right? You put it on and make it murder.
Murder.
Let's cut right to the chase on that, right? Your unborn baby. A baby'd have to go, right? Because you can't have...
Right.
You could kill a fetus. You could terminate a fetus, but you can't kill a baby. No...
Murder a baby.
Right. I mean, a society that endorses the murdering of children, of babies, if that's moral, what is immoral in that world? Right?
Uh-huh.
And again, it's they have controlled our young people through language, through the corruption of language.
That's right.
And when they couldn't deal with global warming anymore, they gave them climate change. When they couldn't deal with abortion anymore, they gave them reproductive rights. They couldn't deal with gay marriage, they gave them marriage equality. I mean, they're always obfuscating the language to pass things that sane people would typically reject. So a woman's right to kill her unborn baby, I'll even be soft, not murder, just kill, shall not be infringed. What percentage of the vote does that get? In a state like, say, a sane state like Missouri, or even an insane state like New York State or California. It doesn't pass in California.
It's hard to say.
Yeah. Unless they're so far gone. But and that, I think the great strength, the great asset is right now is the idiot level of our young people. Their minds aren't well formed yet. They're empty skulls filled with mush, as Rush would say, right? They can still be rescued. They could be saved. And I think the combination of a lot of smart people coming over and long-form discussions, and our own, apostles of wisdom going out to the college campuses and talking to these people offers some glimmer of hope. It may not pay off in the immediate future, but I think it will pay off down the road. So
they'll try to just make everything disappear as they start to lose these arguments.
Yeah.
Move on.
Change the terms.
MoveOn.com.
Right.
MoveOn.com. And then change the terms and all that, like you say. But
we won't pretend that we've been out chanting from the river to the sea.
Right.
We won't be out. We'll pretend that we haven't been out advocating the genocide of the Jewish people, or the wanton killing of millions of unborn babies every year. We'll pretend that someone else did that.
Well, I saw that just today. Some Wall Street Journal or Barron's. It was Barron's.
Yeah.
Was putting these headlines up. that Kid Rock's boycott of Bud Light's over. Kid Rock's moved on. It's all good now. Kid Rock says, let's move on.com. Let's get going. With the whole Bud Light thing's over. It's just over. And I'm looking at that, and then I see a couple of other little fluff pieces like Anheuser-Busch really showing strong numbers and all this stuff. And I'm like, okay, I'm not living in a cave. I've been watching this crap. Bud Light's not doing great. It's not over in anybody's mind.
Right.
Kid Rock never said that. And you start reading it, it's like they've just decided they're going to declare victory and move on. This is what they do. It's time to change the subject. This is no longer a topic of discussion.
You know what I think Kid Rock and certain other people are doing is showing we took you down. If you come back to us, we can bring you back up.
Except I don't think it's even legitimately happening.
I don't think so either.
But that's what I thought when I first read it.
Right. And that may happen.
Yeah.
They may say at some point, okay, you pay us enough money. You know, you honor the principles of the American founding and stop jacking us around. We'll bring you back up to somewhere near where you were. Never back all the way, because I'm gone. They lost me.
But that sounds like the leftists projecting the way they are onto this.
Right.
When actually it was it wasn't a boycott.
No.
It was an organic thing.
It was spontaneous.
Keep your crappy beer
right.
with the stupid transsexual on the can. I don't want this.
I want to close with one anecdote. You know, I have a summer home, little place, cottage in Western New York. And I have a woman who's the caretaker during the years. She's a great right-winger who's paid her price, paid the dues. You know, I can't go into that long story, but when I came back up after the summer, this coming past summer,
mm-hmm.
I saw a refrigerator filled with Bud Light, right? I thought it was a joke. I thought you were just teasing me by buying as like a gift, you know, for letting her stay there all year, right? And then I finally talked to her. And I said, thanks. Was that? I said, was the Bud Light a joke, or did you buy it before the whole thing came down? She goes, no, Jack. It was there when I got here. You bought it last year, right? It was my beer. I was a Bud Light loyalist.
Wow.
They lost, you know, I mean, however many cans of beer I buy a year, I probably drink 750 Bud Lights a year. It's not a lot, but, you know, for a fraternity house, that's a weekend. But that's what they lost. I'm not coming back unless they.
Why would you come back?
Unless they pay me.
Oh, I really miss the taste of that Bud Light, man. It's so much better than the Coors Light.
And we know Coors is bad as Bud, and Miller's as bad as, you know, they're owned by the same company. But Bud stuck its neck out there. And,
oh, yeah.
And the frat boys of America said no. And that's our hope. The frat boys of America will save America.
Well, that wraps up. That goes full circle then. It's going to be the frat boys that save us.
And you heard this here first on Upstream with Cashel and Edge. Coming to you live from
Real Media, Overland Park, Kansas.
See you next year.
Bye.